But this first lady that walked in the trade show on opening day came up to me and said, "Oh, well, my husband can do that."
Huh.
I said, I said, "Fantastic. That's awesome." And
So I guess let's get on to the fun stuff. I've never gotten to hear your story at all. I haven't gotten to hear any of the pieces. I haven't got to hear how you came into the industry. Nothing. So I'm really interested to hear how you even got started. Uh, so give me the before, how you got into concrete, kind of what it looked like in the beginning and middle, and then where you currently are at.
so before, went to school, got a computer networking degree, and worked as a network tech for a tech company down in Phoenix. Then kind of got bored with that a little bit, so I decided to go pursue a business degree up in northern Arizona. Got several years into that business degree, kind of got sick of going to school, didn't finish it, and decided it was time to get back out into the working world. And so hopped around from meaningless job to meaningless job for years until I got into um, working with contractors as a laborer and just kind of learning the trades. I guess I should preface this with saying that my grandfather on my mother's side was a woodworker and furniture maker in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in his younger years. And so he always instilled, he and another individual in my younger years instilled a love for woodworking with me and a love for organized shops and working out of small spaces. And so I went into the trades, started working on homes with a buddy of mine. We had gotten into a investment opportunity up in North Nevada where we moved up there, bought a little fixer upper, did all of the work ourselves, re-leveled the home on a shoddy foundation, re-drywalled the whole thing, took it down to studs, went all the way back up to a finished home,
Nice.
and then sold it. During that period, I had met my wife because that was where she was from, and we decided to move back down to Arizona, kind of where my roots were at. And so came back down here, worked a few trade jobs here and there, but kind of got a little burnt out by it. Just the being outside on the job site all the time in the cold was really kind of wearing on me. And so she and I had moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. She was going to school at the time, and I needed a little bit steadier income that kind of kept me in where I was happy. So I went and got a job as a laboratory technician at an orthodontic office. And that's really where I kind of started understanding molds, really understanding molds in a way that they were useful. And so I was making basically Invisalign before Invisalign was a thing for an orthodontist here in Flagstaff, and worked in a very small space. It was very and very organized and concise operation. He was pumping out a lot of production from about an 8 foot by 8 foot room. And so it kind of taught me that we could do really high production in a very small space if you were organized and well thought out in your processes. From there, I had decided that on a whim, I had a suggestion about learning to make concrete countertops. And that was at the time when Futong Cheng was having his classes over in San Francisco. And so I hadn't heard about Buddy Rhodes at that point in time yet. And that was my first introduction to it. And so, and I don't even remember the year that was, but went over, took his first class, came back with a little bit of product, some of his Pro Formula mixes and his little workbook that he sent the classes away with, and immediately went down and cast a small kitchen in a little guest house for my parents that needed remodeling. And so it was, take the class, and then immediately go home and make something. So you kind of drive that skill set home.
Mhm.
From there, I just did small projects on personal residences and for friends here and there, little wine bar, another little vanity, really not much for quite a few years after that. And so Wetcast was really like my first introduction into the industry. Um, Fast forward a couple years, my wife and I had bought a house. It was time to start renovating it. And, we had finished our kitchen and we needed countertops. And so I, for some reason, I had gotten a hold of the Sure Creek guys over there. Because at that point, the Futong Cheng guys had then moved over to the Sure Creek end of the spectrum. Concrete Exchange, I believe it was offering classes that were doing that. And then, so I went ahead and took that class, and that was my first real introduction to GFRC. Spray face, fiber-rich backers, really thin pieces, doing waterfall legs, things like that. And so went over, took that class. I met one individual while I was there, Kevin McDonald of Concrete Alternatives. Started following him. He and I kind of hit it off in the class and became good friends. And he kind of let me know that there was this whole plethora of people out there that were interested in this. And he told me about Cody Carpenter and Sean Albright and Jake Brady and these other kind of, how can I say, the
Crazy
guys that were doing,
motherfuckers.
the guys that were doing really, really good work
Mhm.
early in the game before it really became a big thing. And so I started looking at Cody's profile and Jake Brady's work, and I was stunned that you could do this with concrete. And
Mhm.
so came back, cast a couple of tops here on my personal home, got those kind of dialed, and then fast forward a few years, and I kind of had a shit or get off the pot moment. I was working for this orthodontist, and he was requesting a lot more of my time and not looking to pay me anymore in terms of what he needed out of me. And
Mhm.
so it was like, look, you can either, start up the business and get this going and hope for the best, or you can keep grinding it away for this other guy and build his dream out. And he and I became really good friends over the course of me working in the lab. And he always told me, he said, Henry, you're never gonna, you're not gonna be here for the rest of your life. I hope you know that. I have expectations of you that you're not going to be working for me in the lab. You're going to go do something else on your own. And so that really hit home for me because he was a friend and a confidant as well as my boss. And so I went on this trip to go to a cousin's wedding out in Boston. Did a big walk around in Boston. Saw some of Jay Gillis's work,
Mhm.
and was just like, all right, it's time. So I came back. I put in my notice. At that point in time, I had an investment property going, so that was able to kind of supplement my income while my wife was working. So I was able to step away from the orthodontic gig
Nice.
and started the business. Really got serious with it. Devoted all my time to it, and just started plugging away. And so that was like, I want to say that was late 2017, early 2018 when I really got serious about it. Um, and then Kevin started telling me about the classes. Plan B was the first one that I went to, and then the Concrete Design School was the next one that I had heard about, and so I signed up for Plan B immediately. Like 2 weeks after that, I signed up for the uh, Concrete Design School over in Arkansas and Tennessee.
Mhm.
Um, Went and did the 4 days over at Plan B, which was just insane. I had no idea that there was this group of people that were so serious about doing this, and it just it kind of blew my mind a little bit. It was at that point that I had met Jack. I'd actually gone down to Plan B and came down there with some pieces that I had for installation in a neighborhood down in Phoenix. Had never heard about Mike Cook or about Jack, and I walk into Plan B and I'm like, I messaged Cody a week before and I said, hey, do you think you could, portion me off like 2 install guys so I could go get this install done and get these pieces into place? And he said, no problem. When you get here, you'll be able to, run into someone. They'll be able to kind of help you out. And so I walk into the place, and first people I run into are Jack and Mike. And they're like, oh yeah, we're in Sedona. We're right around the Verde Valley. And I said, well, hey, you want to come on and install with me? And so they graciously jumped in the truck with me. We went over to this Mount Troon neighborhood and put in this tabletop and a sofa back table on some like wrought iron legs. And then, we went back to Plan B, and that, as they say, was that.
Mm-hmm.
So the next 4 days just spent making, went back to Flagstaff, did a few more projects in between then and going to the concrete design school. Jumped back in the plane, went over to Arkansas and Tennessee, and spent the next 2 weeks with Dusty and Brandon, and just kind of got a real concise education in the course of a month about what was possible with this stuff, and if you just put your mind to it, you can make anything. And so came back from that, and because I had started the LLC and gotten the business up and going, and I wasn't in the trades in Flagstaff at the time, I thought a really good way to plug myself into the community was to join a business networking group. And so I came back to the business networking group, did a presentation for them where I kind of showed what I could do, and I swear it was using like the most rudimentary pictures of the crappiest projects I'd ever done at that point in time. It was like one little floating vanity sink, this little wet cast bar right behind me,
Mm-hmm.
another wet cast vanity in the house upstairs. And a gentleman here in town was like, yeah, come do my kitchen. And then he gave me a deposit, and I was like, holy shit, this is possible. It was kind of that I can actually do this moment. And then from there, it just kind of, just job after job in the single car garage up here in Flagstaff, polishing out in freezing temperatures in my driveway, doing my best not to piss my neighbors off, but with my huge white concrete stain running down the cul-de-sac, and loading and unloading the garage every single day with tables and pieces, and just hoping I could work around that. And my wife was expecting at the time, and so I think that's really what lit the fire under me to get rolling and to get this thing moving, was the fact that I had a baby on the way, and I had to make this work at all costs. And so it was a lot of after I would always spend dinner with my wife and always go to bed with my wife. We would kind of go into bed together, and then I'd kind of wait for when she fell asleep. As soon as I could hear her sleeping, I'd get up and I'd go down to the garage and I'd work for a few more hours. And so that's kind of how it started.
That is crazy. um, so where you are right now is this kind of like, are you in like a holding pattern, if you will, or is there a goal to flex and get bigger, or like is there any goals to increase in size, or are you happy with where you are right now?
So scaling scares me a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to get so big that I lose quality control, or I lose the reason that I got into this in the first place, which was, a love for creating and building relationships with people. And so I don't really know where I'm going yet. It could be getting bigger. I mean, I can't, as we all know, we can't do this forever. Concrete's heavy. It wears us down. But I would sure like to do it for the duration of when I'm able to. So I do have plans on building out a bigger shop down in the Verde Valley, but I've always kind of taken this mantra that, get to a certain point and then let things hum along, and, don't scale too fast because it can get you in trouble. and I've seen it with some other people where they get into huge shops and then all of a sudden they realize that they have to make $10,000 worth of stuff a month just to keep the ball rolling forward.
Hmm.
And that's what I don't want to do. Is I've got very low overhead, and if I want to be able to step away and take a couple of weeks off, I can. December has been a very good example of that. Uh, Jack is went down for surgery on December 9th for his hip. He's getting his hip replaced. He's doing great, but I took that as an opportunity to kind of take a couple of weeks off. And of course, my friend calls me up for this install, and hey, my house is ready. It's time to get our countertops and everything
Hmm.
done. And so my month off quickly lost 2 weeks, but I never want to be able to not say that I can just take a couple of days off and be okay with that. Um, I take words from like Cody Carpenter. He's like, build a business that you can turn off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and turn on at 8 o'clock in the morning, because you're just
Hmm.
going to burn out if you don't do that. Um, it's Clients are always going to be there. People are always going to call. Kitchens are always going to be being remodeled. Um, but if you don't make the time for yourself, your clients aren't going to make the time for you. So,
Yeah. Are there any things that you have done, maybe intentionally, or maybe it's just part of your personality, to kind of keep that time frame intact? Because it's pretty easy with what we do to let that bleed over happen, and it could happen in either direction, right? You could, somebody who's more inclined towards laziness, they could let that 8 becomes 9, becomes 10, becomes 11 starting times, or maybe on the tail end of it, like maybe they stop working at 3 o'clock or whatever it happens to be. But it can also be where clients are eating into your time. um, is there anything that you put in place to kind of help lock those times in, or is it just a natural consequence of your personality?
I mean, I don't set an alarm where I walk out of the shop at 5 o'clock every day, but
Hmm.
um, when I was growing up, my parents, no matter what, um, we always sat down to dinner at the dinner table, and we always had those conversations at the end of the day. How was your day? How's everything going? Are you guys okay? Um, and so that really kind of beat this thread of family first into my mentality. And so um, I always kind of I have a picture of my girls in my shop, and I always kind of look at it towards the end of the day and like, hey, this project's still going to be here tomorrow. Um, a day on your client's timeline is not going to make or break their project. Go have dinner with your kids because tomorrow's not promised.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you give people like a healthy timeline? Because the problem that comes up in the forums all the time is they'll be like, I just have to get this thing installed tomorrow. There's That seems to happen. I feel like a lot more than it should, but it might just be the nature of the beast, where you have so many people that are there in the forums, there's a good chance that that comes up at any given time just due to the number of people that are in there. So I don't know if it's as big of a problem as it seems, or if it actually isn't a problem just because of the amount of people. Does that make sense?
it does. So we are always the last people on the job site. We're finishes. So contractor contractors are always going to try to push you to get done faster.
Hmm.
Homeowners are always going to push you to get done faster because they're sitting there with cabinets done. They don't have countertops yet, and then we have a timeline on the front of that. I outline in my contracts with people that it's a 21 to 28 days of working time that we need to be able to get these pieces installed. And that in itself, that timeline works in that family time and weekends off if I need
Hmm.
it. Um, because and I take that timeline back from my wet cast days when you had to leave pieces sitting on the table for 4 or 5 days, and you
Hmm.
had a dead shop for you'd cast and then you'd have a dead shop for almost a week before you could flip and process.
Hmm.
I mean, if we've been in this for long enough, you know that like wet cast, old school wet cast, you had to leave it in the mold for 4 days, then you had to flip it, spray it down with water, and leave it out of the mold for 2 or 3 days before you could even hit it with pads, or it was just too soft. And so in light of that, I never really change that timeline with people. And I'm very big on managing expectations with my clients and not, I'd rather under promise than over promise.
Hmm.
So if I tell them 28 days and I'm there in 14, they're ecstatic. Things are
Right.
done 2 weeks early and it moves their timeline forward. So I find that if I don't let contractors, designers, homeowners push me around and say, hey, I need this by this day. Um, and there's always exceptions to that, of course.
Hmm.
But I try to be very strict about keeping those timelines intact. Um, it's difficult because there's always the Thanksgiving and Christmas push.
Oh yeah.
So everybody always wants their kitchen done by Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And so, but I tell contractors that push me, when it gets to there, because I'm faster than everybody else. And so when it comes to these guys that are doing granite and whatnot in my area, they're 16 weeks out. And so if they're contacting me and they're contacting the granite guys, I'm telling them that they can have their kitchen before Thanksgiving, and the granite guys are telling them it's going to be after the new year.
Hmm.
So, I find that it's a balance. Sometimes if you pick and choose those clients accordingly and you set the expectations correctly, you can work those timelines in. I think what a lot of people, and this is purely an assumption, I don't have any like metric for this, but um, I think we all kind of want to be the hero. And Jack always says, look, you can be the hero or you can be the asshole. Take your pick. And so I tend to shy away from being the hero all the time and be more of the asshole and just manage the expectations accordingly so that we don't get ourselves, our personal timelines, and the business in trouble.
Mm. That's a pretty good way of looking at it. From Yeah, because it comes up pretty often where uh, I think with after talking with several of the guys, it comes down to like fear of not getting the job. I was talking with Josh Steele last night about it, and that's one of the things that he brought up is almost a fear that you either won't get the job or maybe they'll kick you off the job if you kind of stay true to whatever the timeline is that you gave. I think that seems to be the more I think about it and the more I look at how people are phrasing some of these questions, it seems to be more that than that and poor planning. I think are the two main things if I had to guess. Um, are there any other things that you talk about with clients as far as like setting expectations that you found that are maybe more beneficial than something else from maybe just a timing perspective? Like you mentioned that there are a couple things that you want to do on the front end. Is that like picking out colors, samples, anything like that, so that as soon as you get templates, you're off to the races, or is there something else that you try and get during that time frame?
So I kind of have a rubric set up for how I start the process with clients. Usually it's the initial contact and then a couple of emails back and forth or phone calls back and forth. And I immediately try to set them up with a showroom meeting. So I have a local cabinet guy here in town that has been gracious enough to allow me to rent some floor space out of his showroom.
Nice.
And so I put a couple of tops into his space. He lets me keep several dozen samples over there. And, it's not much square footage. I'm probably less than 100 square feet in his showroom of what I occupy. But it provides me a really professional looking space that's outside of the shop because, as we know, clients coming over to the shop and getting to see the kitchen is not always ideal for instilling confidence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Sometimes it looks like like a hurricane went through. Like, what is this? Oh, don't
totally.
mind that. It doesn't really work as an explanation.
But I mean, how I parry that is, clients never go to the fabrication part of a granite shop. They go to their slab yard where they can pick out their slab. but they don't let them go to where the CNCs are at or where the wet polish booths are at, where they've got the, the behind the scenes kind of stuff going on. So I feel like personally, we shouldn't be doing that to clients because it demystifies the process. And I feel like there has to be some mystery in this in order to charge what we're charging. And so we get to the showroom, we choose colors, we settle in on design. I try to work up a very rough quote based on shop drawings or dimensions there. And then I say, look, I'll email you by the end of the day. And then when they leave the showroom, I shut and lock the door, sit down at my laptop, get them a quote. And almost within 15 minutes of them leaving the showroom, I try to have that quote done, if it's possible for me to be able to do that. Sometimes there's some other mitigating factors of having to go do a job site walk or looking at the install parameters. But the way that I do my quotes is it kind of accounts for the majority of those things already. So it could be the worst install or the best install. I've got enough money worked into my quote that I could rent a crane if I needed to and not be losing money. So that's kind of like my rubric for starting the process. And then, so I accept credit cards, digital payment, cash and check. And then we follow up. I usually give them a day or two. I follow up with an email and say, hey, just checking back in how this went, pending their timeline. It kind of can hasten that process or not. Because usually when they're contacting me, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
And so at that point, get a deposit and get them to choose a color, usually at that showroom visit. Sometimes it's another visit out to their property so that they can see the color up against their cabinets, or send them home with some samples so that they can look at them in different lights. And I'm very frank with people. I tell them, take some samples. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat. Take some samples home with you. Look at it under evening light. Look at it under morning light. Have some coffee with it. Have a glass of wine. Spill some wine on it. Leave it overnight. Have a cup of coffee with it. Spill some coffee on it. Leave it overnight. Wipe it off the next morning, and make sure that, like it was like my tagline. Make sure that concrete is a good fit for you. And so I kind of put the ball in their court, and I try not to seem too needy to get the job, because I think that neediness comes across far more pervasive than we think that it does when we're in the process, especially when bills are due and you don't have any jobs coming down the pipe. So
yeah, that can be the toughest part when it goes you got to make a paycheck. I think that's why a lot of the guys will recommend making sure you have a side hustle, or doing this as a side hustle and keeping the job. Kind of what you did earlier when you had the mold. Well, there's pros and cons to it, but where you still had a little bit of income coming in, but it can be that state of, it's comfortable. You don't really want to go out and do the hard thing of talking with designers and learning a new skill set and all that. But really, having that peace of mind can be worth it to some people. Some people, it's just better just to go all in, just be done with it. It's interesting that you have. I mean, you've been in business for a while, so it could just be that you've gained some of those skill sets along the way, and those frameworks and the processes that kind of you talked about and alluded to. Did getting or working towards the business degree that you were talking about earlier, or school, did that help with anything that you're working on now, or not really?
not really. I don't feel like because I wasn't in that for a long time. I only had 2 years under my belt, most of which was spent getting drunk and skipping classes. So I would say that no, this is more just having conversations with people within the industry, taking tidbits of knowledge here and there about what has worked for them. A lot of my and a lot of it is joining this kind of professionals referral group here in town. Is it plugged me into a industry here in Flagstaff or I shouldn't say industry, into a group of people here in Flagstaff that are all running their own businesses within my geographic location. And so we meet every Tuesday morning. We usually sit around and have coffee for a few minutes after the meeting, but talking to them about what works. There's a few other craftsmen in the group. There's a welder, there's a cabinet guy, and just kind of having conversations about what works for them, how they've structured their business, and not just listen to what they're saying, but take those principles that they're using and that's working for them and applying them.
So you would recommend people join a networking group or a professional group of some kind?
I don't know. Networking groups can be very clicky, so I feel like it sometimes leaves a bad taste in people's mouth.
Hmm.
But I think any way that you can plug yourself into like-minded business owners within your area is a good thing. Whether that's joining your chamber of commerce, doing lunch and learns with other local business owners, befriending contractors, walking job sites, anything that you can do that can provide you some insight into running a successful business within your area, I think is just adds to your wealth of knowledge.
The group that you're part of right now, is that just a local group or do they have like other chapters in other cities and states? Do you know?
It is just a local group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
it was started by a realtor down in Sedona that moved up here, and I will say this about the networking groups is they do leave a bad taste in people's mouth because they're very clicky. And
mhm.
so um, it's provided me some good referrals and it really helped me get going at the beginning. Um, but now I do it because a lot of the people that are in there are my friends, and I enjoy spending the time with people who are successful here in town and are doing good business, and try to focus on oh providing either quality products or services to the local area.
Yeah. How did you go about finding that group there in the very beginning? Was it just through word of mouth? Did you search for something online? Like it seems like a di- uh, s- mm, difficult might be a little bit of an extreme way of putting it, but yeah, I can't really think of a good way to phrase it. Like, how did you go about finding the group? Did you test some out and you're like, this isn't for me, and then go try other ones? Like what did that
So
process look like?
there's three in my local community, and I got it on a recommendation from a friend. They were a photographer. They had joined the group, a wedding photographer, venue photographer. They had joined the group, and I believe that they recommended me simply so that they could get the referral and waive their fees for the year. Now, I say fees for the year; it's very slight. I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking like $150 per year to be
Hmm.
in this group, so it's not much at all. Um, but yeah, there was a referral from this photographer friend of mine, and it turned out to be one of the better things that I did in my community for breaking out and getting people to have brand awareness within my community.
Well, you just mentioned talking, or you mentioned going on to job sites as far as like building relationship with trades. What it how like what do you do when you do that? That seems, I get that conceptually, but like what does that look like in like real life?
Um, so I make sure I have branding on my truck, whether that's a magnet or a piece of vinyl.
Hmm.
I always have business cards in my pocket, and I always kind of dress the part. So this is kind of my garb for going on the job site is having my logos plastered all over my stuff, so people see me and know that I'm the decorative concrete guy in here in town. And I'll literally drive around neighborhoods and go to job sites. And if I see workers on the job site, I'll walk up with a card and an iPad and say, "Hey, is the general here? Can I speak with him?" Kind of track him down and just introduce myself. "Hey, I'm Henry. I'm a local decorative concrete artisan here in town. Do you know anything about decorative concrete in terms of countertops, hearths, and fireplaces? And do you have a few minutes that I can chat?" And it's either a door getting slammed in the face, or it's they're open to it. And I feel like if they get my card in their hand, um, that's a win for me. So if the conversation doesn't go past me giving them a card and um, just being cordial with them. I feel like in the trades, everybody's out of time. Nobody has any time to talk or to do anything in terms of you know, being amicable with each other. They're always just rushed. I got to get to this stage, this stage, this
Hmm.
stage. And so I try to break that mold and just have a conversation with people. Um,
Yeah, I
so
think that definitely part of my maybe my bias is because I'm always so focused on something. I would assume, possibly incorrectly, that like that would come across as very inconsiderate. And I don't think it like if the roles were reversed, like you were sitting there and then the person, I don't know that I would still view it the same way. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy when it comes to that, but I can see pretty easily how that would come across as more of a problem than does that usually work out for you? It sounds like I I would I feel like there would be a lot of slam doors. Like I'm busy, dude. Why the fuck are you bothering me here on the job site? You know what I mean?
so I think in the way that you're thinking about it, it seems like it would be, going up and door knocking, for lack of a better way to put it,
Hmm.
um, doesn't seem like a desirable way to get jobs. But I also think that it pertains to your individual market. Um, I do not live in a big town. Very much everybody that's here is friends with each other. They know a friend of a friend, and so it's not like there's 100 contractors walking onto those job sites doing that.
Mm,
It's literally a very small community here. So what has worked for me may not work for someone in a bigger city. Um,
right.
and so I think it definitely comes down to the area that you're in and the type of people that are in your area. I don't think it would work on the East Coast, but we're in Arizona and everybody's nice and wants to talk. We're all kind of nature people up here, and so
Mm,
it's I feel like that works for me. But I was always taught that relationships, business or otherwise, are built in person with handshakes and eyeballs. And
hmm.
so I feel like putting yourself in front of people um, is a good way for them to get to know you and to break down that barrier of assumption about who you are and what you're trying to do. And so uh, I've always kind of taken it that the worst thing that can happen is a no. And as soon as you get okay with hearing no's, um, then you yearn for that one or two out of 100 yeses. And so when I was first starting this out, I mean, I literally keep every single old quote in a Dropbox on my computer. And every year I kind of go back through that. And I was like, just a couple months ago, I looked through 2017, 2018, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was a no. Oh, that was a no. Yep, there was another no. Oh, yeah, didn't get that one. Didn't get that one. But I got that one,
Hmm.
and that one, that was the first check that went into my hand. And so that stands out. And I consider every no or every, fail forward, fail often, and fail upward. And so I considered every no a failure, and I could take something away and learn about that. And what did I do wrong here? Was I too forward? Did I not say something the right way? And so being a business owner, you have to fail every single day,
Hmm.
and that's the approach that I took to it. And if I had one contractor out of an entire day's worth of door knocking get a hold of me, then that was a win for me.
How did you cultivate that mindset? Does that just come naturally to you with your personality, or did it? Some people like they like to listen to podcasts, or they was there anything that helped with that? It almost seems with like how you're talking and the inflection in your voice, it almost seems like it's a little bit more natural than learned per se.
I I don't recall ever learning it. I have listened to a lot of like podcasts. Modern Craftsman podcast is one of my favorites.
Hmm.
Working Hands podcast is another one that I really like. Um, And while I may not have taken any of those tidbits of knowledge specifically from one of those podcasts, I feel like it's this the commonality amongst all of these people that are talking about being in the trade, our types of trades, is uh, wanting to share that knowledge, wanting to not feel or be alone in what we're doing. And a lot of that for me was just, sharing. Nobody in this town when I first started out knew what I was doing or how I was doing it. And so if I didn't get out there and tell them, no one else was going to. They
Hmm.
were just going to go to the granite guys because they didn't know. And so a lot of my business starts with customer and client education. And, there's, I guess in my early stages, I did a lot of not trade shows, but like home shows here in my town.
Yeah,
And at home shows, you would, which I think are a terrible idea. I don't do them anymore, just to be clear.
that seems to be the
But
general consensus. Yeah.
but what it did is it gave me a real concise education about how to repeatedly say the same thing to people over and over and not get any rise out of them. I remember the first time that I had this. It was my first trade show with my cabinet guy. He had set up a booth and he said, "Look, I need some tops for my cabinets. You're in the showroom." He's like, "Well, you want to cast some tops and then put them on there, and we'll go to the trade show together." I was like, "Sure." He said, "I don't want to sit at the trade show for 4 days straight, so I can man the booth this day, you can man the booth that day. We can kind of both field and pass out cards, and we'll just kind of do this dual booth thing."
Nice.
And I thought that was a great idea because we all need countertops to put or we all need cabinets to put our countertops on.
Hmm.
And so, but this first lady that walked in the trade show on opening day came up to me and said, "Oh, well, my husband can do that."
Ah.
I said, "Fantastic. That's awesome." And I guess that's more of just uh, my mentality and my personality is that when people come up to me with negativity, I try to parry it with something positive. I'm not looking to pick a fight with anybody. I'm looking to be amicable with them. And so when someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, my husband can cast concrete counter. What's so hard about that? What's different?" And I say, "Well, here, let me show you some options about what I can do. We're a very small boutique shop. We can do any color that you want. We will be happy to cast some samples for you." And I feel like negativity is one of those things that some types of people like to off put, and you can dispel that by killing them with kindness. And
Hmm.
so if you just keep coming at them with a calm, cool mindset, and when they spit out that negative comment, you kind of mentally close your eyes and say 1, 2,
Hmm.
3, then respond. Don't respond quickly because you'll say things that you don't mean. You don't really mean. You think you do in the heat of the moment, but you don't. And so,
Yeah, something that I've been learning actually just from having a 4-year-old daughter that is basically my terrible personality with no filter is it you learn very quickly, hopefully, I guess, hopefully you learn very quickly, like, they're a child. They don't know anything about anything. They're stupid. Like, I don't care how much people love their children. Your child is still stupid. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. You got to understand that people have bad days, and it rarely, especially if it's that initial interaction, that shit doesn't have anything to do with you. They could have had just somebody just cut them off pulling into the parking lot or clip them, or there's a whole host of things. And I'm sure people are going to get tired of me bringing that up, but like, I think it's good to get it just hammered into your head. Like, it rarely has anything to do with you when you're going through a bad experience, or the general contractors like, "Why are you on my job site? Like, get the out of here." Um, you have no idea. Like, some of his guys could have just put a wall up in the wrong space. Like, or they ran the electrical all wrong and something has to get done. There's like there's a million things that could have happened that has nothing to do with you. I mean, the guy could just be a complete asshole, so there's that as well. Um,
Another thing that has been, and you just made me think of it, so I want to mention it. Another thing that's been very successful with me with architects, contractors, and designers is lunch and learns. Um, a lot of architects don't know in what way GFRC or UHPC applies to what they're doing.
mhm,
And so reaching out to those people, and every couple of months, I kind of go through the yellow pages here in Flagstaff and I look around and I say, hey, call all the architects, call all the designers and say, hey, it's Henry over at HK Concrete. Can I take you out to lunch? I just want to bend your ear for a few minutes. And either I get a yes or a no. So it's that either the door gets slammed in your face or you have an in. And sometimes those lunches, it may cost you 50 to $100 to take someone out to lunch. It'll cost you 2 hours of your time. But I feel like the handshakes and eyeballs, especially in this digital world that we're living in right now, that falls to the
mhm,
wayside. Um, the some of the most earnest relationships that I have inside the concrete industries weren't built through phone calls and text messages. They were built at Plan B. They were built at the Concrete Design School. They were built at the Surecrete class over in California. They're I still talk more on a daily basis with my concrete buddies than I do with any of the kids that I grew up with in high school. And I
mhm,
think that there's something to be said for, wanting to wanting to find your people.
mhm.
And um, you just you have to kind of nurture that, and it doesn't come easy. It takes a concerted effort to call someone up out of the blue, and I don't know if I would say that it's confidence that it takes, but you just have to be okay with getting the door slammed in your face a bunch first, because not everything's going to work out. But the more and more you try, you may have a 1% success rate, you may have a 50% success rate, but you never know what your success rate is going to be until you just start doing it. So,
Right. Uh, I it's not something that I'm going to do moving forward just because I'm focusing so heavily on the digital, but the lunch and learns have come up several times. Can you get like really, because I'm sure there will be plenty of people who want to try that. Can you get really, really granular on that? Like, what is that? Like, it's the buzzword now, and I'm gonna hate myself for using it, but it's the nuance that's involved. Right? So like
okay.
when you go through the yellow pages and you're picking out these people, I really like the thing that Caleb mentioned is going through and looking at like the people who have won awards in your area and contacting them, and maybe you don't have the confidence to talk with those yet, so they just do the yellow pages and just call up people. What does the conversation look like? How do you pick where to go? Is there a conversation between you and that person? Do you like this type of food? Do you set everything up? Like, I for some people that might seem extreme, but like really that granular. Like, what does that entire process look like if you'd be willing to share that?
Um, so in terms of like choosing what architect or designer to contact, or what finding out who those people are, it's usually word of mouth through other contractors. What architect are you using? Is it InDesign? Is it Flag Architects? Is it Reese and Rowe, et cetera, et cetera? So usually that comes from talking to the architects that are on the job site, but sometimes it's just Google searching, for me, Flagstaff architect, Flagstaff designer, and then just running down the list one at a time, taking a note. This person didn't answer. I left them a message. This person answered. They said that they're busy right now. Call them back later.
How are you tracking
Um,
that? Sorry to interrupt.
a notepad,
So
notepad, and then
old
into
school.
a old school. I'm very analog.
Okay.
When it comes to my designs, I'm not real savvy when it comes to Google SketchUp, so I still like to
Hmm.
pull out my and I embrace the artisan in me. I still pull out my leather bound
Nice.
book,
Hmm.
and get very very analog with people, and I tend to feel like sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And so yeah, when it comes to tracking, it goes into the notebook, and then in turn it goes over to an Excel spreadsheet where I kind of keep a running log of what's going on with those conversations. But when I'm in front of the client or I'm doing things on the fly, it's very much just writing it out. Because for me, if I'm on the phone, I can just jot down some notes in my notebook real quick. Then run down the list, call them, make notes of what the contact looks like. Sometimes it's visiting the designer at the local granite showroom. I'm always taking an iPad with me. So I've got and I'll kind of pull it up in the screen here if I can do this real quick. Got all my photos of all my work right on the iPad. So I can just quickly, oh, this is a staircase we did. Oh, that's a vanity we did, et cetera, and kind of just run down the list of, what we have going on so that I can show them quickly what my work looks like without it taking too much time or me having to push them out to social media. And so, most of our work is done through pictures and through showing people, like they need to see what you can do so they know what you can do. And if that's something as simple, let me see if I can hunt this down real quick. If it's something as simple as just pulling up a photo that you have, oh, come on, zoom in, and being like, oh yeah, inlays in concrete, that's what we can do. We can put tiger's eye in concrete. Until you tell someone that's what you can do, they just don't know. And so I feel like it's those types of things are very visceral for people. My birthstone is amethyst. I want a piece of amethyst in there, or I'm in love with opal, or I love seashells. So can I put those in there? And I also take another approach to the conversations with people is, as soon as you say no to somebody, can I put this in there? Well, hesitation. No, I don't think that's a good idea. It's always yes. Yes, we can do that. Figure out the details after the fact, because if you say no to people, it's a no right off the bat, and that resonates in a negative way with them. And so, oh, can I put a brass inlay? Well, there might be some complications. As soon as you start spouting negativity towards it, they're going to be like, yeah, I'm good. You can't do what I want. But if you approach it with an open mind, and yeah, we can absolutely do a turquoise inlay. Yep, we can. You got 5 kids. You want 5 little tiger's eye dots in there? Sure. Figure out the details later. Say yes right off the bat, and get that ball moving forward, because you can always modify those conversations and manage the expectations further down the road. But always say yes to their requests within reason.
Yeah.
So I want a 47-foot seamless piece that needs to float, and you've got to go up 3 stories in terms to get it in. Yeah, no, that ain't gonna fly. So
Sure, we'll just take out this whole wall of your house, and then we'll just.
When you start throwing around the crane word, they tend to get a little hesitant. Oh, I'm gonna have to demo this part of your house to get this in. Wait, you're gonna have to go backwards? Yes. I mean, let's manage expectations, or we can break it into 2 pieces, and they'll be like, oh, okay.
All right. So after you contact the designer and you've successfully gotten through to them, or you've written down your notes, what does that look like with getting that set up, like the actually like setting it up?
So it's kind of out of my hands at that point. Once I do the client education, it's not my choice of whether or not they're going to use me or not. And so what I want to do is I want them to walk away knowing that, I'm a good guy, so to speak. Like, I want them to, when they think about that, their client comes to them, shows them a Pinterest image, I want them to say, oh, well, yeah, I know a guy. I want to be at the forefront of their thought process when they're talking to their clients about their design, their aesthetic, etc.
Right.
A really kind of good example of that is this designer that I use here in town, or she uses me, I should say. I did a lunch and learn with her. She's a very soft-spoken, nice lady. But it was just, hey, can I show you what I do? And so in terms of like starting that conversation, I usually don't like pick where we're going to go eat lunch. I always leave that up to them. Where do you like to eat? You're doing me a favor by letting me take you out, and I'm taking time out of your day, which I know is valuable. So you tell me where you would like to go. And if they have suggestions, we'll pick one of those. If they don't, I'll throw out a few suggestions and kind of meet in the middle. But I usually, if I can, I try to show up at their place of business if they have one, and let them know that I'm willing to put the effort forward to going out of my way, cutting time out of my day so that they will do the same. Relationships are reciprocal, and a lot of times we have to do that up front. And so um, I feel like sometimes you have to go that extra mile first before they will.
Very nice. Do you have a time frame that you usually do your follow-ups with? Is it regular, or is it just kind of when you think about it? How do you go about doing your follow-ups with the type of like lunch and learn specifically?
I try to keep it, about a week out. If I've successfully had a meeting with them, I call them back in a week or so and say, hey, just, touching base. Do you have any projects coming up that, maybe you could spec me in on, or that your clients might like this? Then after that week, I back off. I kind of balls in their court at that point. If they're going to use me, they're going to use me. I don't want to seem too pushy.
Mm-hmm.
And that follow up is very, very benign. I try not to be too up in their shit, so to speak.
Yeah.
It just, if you have some projects coming in, it would be greatly appreciated if you could, suggest what I do. If you need some samples from my showroom, I'll be happy to run them over that may be in the palette that your client's looking at. But then I kind of go hands off. And then I follow up every, 6 months to a year out. Just say, hey, touching base, how you guys doing? And really the touching base and following up is only for the designers that didn't swing on me. The ones that did, I'm talking to them pretty consistently, so there's no need to follow back up.
So you've mentioned samples several times now. I'm kind of curious as to how you go about doing that, because it seems to be both a divisive topic in our industry as well as a something that people are very passionate about as well. So it seems to be a very interesting topic. I'm not entirely sure where the animosity comes from. I know that they can be very time consuming to make. So I get that part of it. Do you make samples for yourself and then you just kind of have them sitting around? Do you make samples specifically for people and clients? Do you charge for those? What is your mindset about that? Because it's always been, this seems to be one of those topics where people are like behind their barricades throwing rocks at each other that I don't understand. I understand the sealer wars. Like, I get that one. But this is the one where I'm just like, I don't get why everybody gets so pissed off about it.
So I think that us as artisans, our relationship with samples varies over the course of our career.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, you have not cast a lot of pieces of concrete, and so you don't really have anything to show anybody. You can reach out to other artisans and you can ask to borrow their pictures when it comes to showroom meetings and things like that. But we're in a very tactile niche, so you have to have things for people to put their hands on. So at the beginning, I feel like samples are a necessary evil. But then as you kind of move forward, you can take that relationship with samples and it changes. So now I almost never have sample days. Maybe once or twice a year I'll have a client that will request a certain color, a certain sand, a certain inlay that they want to see before they pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jack would disagree with me because I don't charge for samples. I might give them maybe one or two samples, one casting day, maybe two casts in a day, and then I'll charge after that. But I feel like asking somebody to pay for something before they've made a decision is counterproductive to getting the job. And so, and I think it all comes down to like how you present it to the clients. If in your initial operating agreement, you're like, look, samples. That's why I like to choose colors and get that decided before we get deposits from people. I've got most of the colors that I like to use, which are just varying loading rates of your, traditional off the shelf pigments. I've got them in varying loading rates in my showroom, so I usually show them like the 3 or the 4 varying grades, and say, here's the lightest, here's the darkest. Where do you want to be at in this spectrum? Um, and if they're like, well, I want something in between here and here, I tend to just be kind of like, well, it's here or here. It's not in between here.
Mm.
This is where we're at with that. Your in betweens are these 4 shades between the lightest and the darkest. So take this sample home, look at it under your light, and see. Because I feel like that is a slippery slope. We got into it with a client in Sedona a couple of months, about a year ago, where she was very particular. She wasn't a designer, but she had great taste, and she wanted as white could be, as white as we could make it. And so high loading rates of titanium, white marble sand as our sand loading in it, pure white slurry. And so we literally probably cast this lady 15 samples and didn't charge for them. And it was terrible. I mean, we really got ourselves, it was like one of those lessons for me and Jack where it was like, okay, we're not doing that again. Mm-hmm. Now we have, 15 to 17 different whites that we can give her. But, when they're throwing darts at a board, like we offer certain finishes, spray face GFRC, SCC GFRC, Dusty Crete, and then Jack's trademark look, Old World Stone. And so if you're in that in that spectrum, we can do 4 different finishes of the same loading rate, and they'll all look different. Yeah. And so, when you start to get into it, you cast all 4 of your finishes in different loading rates. Like you can easily get to 15, 20 samples, no problem. Mm-hmm. And so, I guess my overall feeling about samples is your relationship with them changes as you get busier and as you create more jobs. Now I have silicone molds that I just throw on the table, and any extra mud out of a certain type of project, if we don't already have those samples, we just throw extra into that mold, label it really well, finish it out with that job, and then it goes to the showroom, and then we have that sample on hand. So big sellers for us right now are grays, whites, and blacks, and we've been doing that a lot. So I always cast a couple of samples here and there. So I have 4 or 5 variations of the same color in the showroom. Mm-hmm. So that if one client walks away with a sample and it doesn't come back, I've got a few more sitting there,
or they break
and I don't have
it.
to go through. Or they break it, And we do rather large samples. We do 12 by 12 squares,
nice,
at a 1/2 inch thick, just so they can get an idea of what their countertop will look like, and a substantial size piece. So I feel like the business card or the index card sample sizes don't show off enough of what we do to be successful with getting our clients to choose a color.
Yep. Yeah. I started off with the 12 by 12s, and then I don't know what happened, but I upped it to 16 by 16. For some reason, I love that size for me. I'm glad to hear that you mentioned the size of the samples, because I see people, they'll post these little pictures online or whatever, and it'll be a finished sample, so not just a color blank. And it'll be so small, and I'm like, how are people supposed to know what that looks like over a 5 by 8 island? There's no way. I understand the color blanks, because a color is a color is a color. But that's cool to know that you do the big size samples. Simon does that too with the bigger ones. He's done some monster samples. I'm like, that's that's past me. What I've started to do is every single job also gets 2 sample boxes. I have an 18.5 by 18 sample box, melamine, 5/8 thick, and then a 16 by 16, also 5/8 thick. The 16 by 16 stays with me. That is my version of it, and I'll make it the exact same way that I'm making the job. So if the job is sprayed, Those get sprayed at the exact same time. If it's hand placed, they get hand placed at the exact same time. The 18.5 by 18 sample gets cut down into small handout samples that are, I should probably know these measurements off the top of my head. I think it's like 3 by 4 or something like that. And just cut them on the
Index
wet
card
saw.
size.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
but here's, I'm gonna toot my horn here a little bit. The genius part of this is I'm gonna put a QR code on the back of those so somebody can scan that and then see a picture of the big version of it, so they can
Yep.
see, okay, so this is what it looks like. I can bring it to my house. I can see what it looks like in my, if somebody has really warm bulbs, it's going to look completely different than somebody who's got like a 5000K bulb. So they have that. They can take a picture of the QR code and then they can see a big version of it. I haven't been able to test it too much yet, so it may just be a stupid idea that I think is cool, but um, that's
No,
it.
I think it's a great idea. Um, I think any way that you can marry our analog kind of industry with a little bit of the digital is a bonus. So I think that's a great idea, and I think you should run with it.
We'll see if it works because there's companies out there that they'll do free QR codes for you. Like if you don't do any like the fancy branding or anything like that, and they'll do the QR codes for you for free. There's not any tracking information like analytics and all that. Well, I was like, I don't care about that. I just want to be able to see a picture of the big version of it. So we'll see if that ends up working. I'm pretty excited about it because I'm a little disappointed in our industry. I don't know why we're so slow to adopt the newer technologies, whether it's utilizing lasers, CNCs, 3D printing, um, some of the more digital things. I don't really understand why we're so slow to adopt those things because they would help us so much, especially CNCs. Um, do you use CNC shops or any of those types of technologies, or if not, like, are you avoiding it for a reason? Like, I'm curious as to why either you do avoid them or you do use them, or why you think other people do or do not.
So I do use them when the job calls for it. Using them third party is incredibly expensive, and so the job has to, at least in my area, the job has to account for that. As to why most shops don't use it, uh, I think it's kind of the mentality of why do we still use hand planes when we have power planers out there, as a woodworker. Sometimes it's that artisanal nature of our industry that we want to hang on to and not let it get to digital. And so, in terms of 3D printing and that stuff, I've had a 3D printer for about a decade now, and I try to use it where I can. I don't find it to be incredibly applicable to what I'm doing, as I'm not selling smalls. But I think if you were doing a lot of like flower pots, succulent planters, vases, things
Hmm.
like that, I think it would be really applicable. One thing that I did do is I 3D printed a version of my logo, cast it into silicone, then cast that positive back into silicone, and I stamp pieces or I put that into molds. Sometimes I can do it. And the reason I did that is because I thought, oh, we can do a brass plaque or something like that. But in reality, that's just one more step that you have to do that you can mess up on.
Yeah.
And so just a little silicone version of my logo right in the edge of the countertop is almost foolproof. You don't have any more steps to it, but that's only if clients want that or they're okay with it. You always have to get consent before those,
Oh
and
yeah.
sometimes those pieces don't. Not every piece calls for that. Like I don't need my logo in every single kitchen that I put it in. It's like in someone's personal home that it's going to see 5 new eyes a year. Do I really need that branding
Hmm.
in their kitchen? Is that the battle I want to pick?
Are there some places or
um,
pieces that you really push to have that branding in place? Like if it's a commercial job or something like that, I can see that going
yeah.
either way. Where like the business is like, no, fuck you, we're paying for this. We're not gonna have your logo stamped all over it.
Um, Commercial bars, I think, is a really good
Mm.
place for it if they'll allow you to. I do think that it can be a make or break it conversation, and if it is going to be a break it, I step away from it. I don't need, you know, a good example was that Tia Carmen bar that we did for the Marriott down there, that huge curved bar with double waterfall islands.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to put my logo in there, but it just didn't call for it. The contractor didn't want to have anything to do with it. They wanted to keep it very brand specific to theirs, and it was such a unique piece that I stepped away from that. I was like, I'm good. I don't need to pick that battle with this one, even though it may be one of the most beautiful bars I've ever done, or Jack and I've ever done. So, yeah, pick your battles when it comes to that. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's not. Make that call in the situation.
When you
So,
say step away from it, do you mean step away from the job, like don't take the job, or are you saying step away from insisting that it gets put in?
step away from insisting that it gets put in.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just say, wow, you're really hardcore on that, aren't you?
No.
Okay. No, that's good.
I'm not that in my I'm not that in my head about having my branding on everything. So
Yeah, it's interesting hearing people talk about that with the different inlays that they have with the logo. The woodworkers seem to be kind of back and forth on that too, whether they put the branding iron somewhere on the piece or whatever. Like, I mean, I have one, but like, I would never put it in like a conspicuous config. It just in most cases, I think it just takes away from the piece. But I get why people do it and like it. It's like, I mean, you wouldn't get a painting done where the artist doesn't sign the work. I'm like, I get it, but how many artists are painting a countertop? you know,
right,
or a
right.
table. It's like, I get where you're coming from, but what we do is more a craft than an art. Sorry, guys. Like, I I get the marketing.
We'll respectfully agree to disagree.
Like, I get why I get it. I understand it, but I just can't make that jump. But that's just me. Everybody should have their own thoughts on it, and I would maybe not fight to the death, but I would support anybody who is confident enough to have an opinion, can back that opinion up, and is willing to stick with it. I think that's admirable, even if your opinion is stupid. um, so I think one of the topics that you and I connected on first with, like we've both been in the forums together for a really long time. This is the first time that we've ever talked in person. But I think the thing that brought us together first and foremost was actually tools. And it's very interesting to know that you're in a shop size very similar to what I'm in. And I'm curious as to, because you mentioned this there at the very beginning, of shop organization for smaller shops, as well as you're very knowledgeable on the tools when I had a question about that on your recommendation. I think it was specifically for, shit, what was it? I'm pretty sure it was for the Festool dust collectors, I think. Can you hit on some of the things that have made the biggest impact for you, for organization wise, in specifically in small shops, but that you could see easily scaling up to larger shops? Or maybe you could separate
um,
it into two categories, whichever one's the easiest.
so I'll broad stroke it right off the bat.
Okay.
Doesn't come down to any specific tool or system. Take the time to clean.
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to set up your shop in a way that it's functional for you, um, keeping at the forefront of your organization system sneaker time. So at each station, have very specific things that are used for that station. Um, Tape measures by your chop saw, pencils next to your chop saw, uh, safety equipment, your whether you use earbuds or earplugs or ear muffs, safety goggles, gloves when they're applicable. Even if you have them at 2 or 3 different places in your shop, keep them within an arm's grasp of the tool that you need to use them,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're not wasting a lot of time walking from one side of your shop to the other, grabbing things that you need consistently. And a good example of that is I have a chop saw station, a metal chop saw station on one side of the shop. a wood chop saw station on an adjacent section of the shop, and then a general assembly area on the other side of the shop. And we have pencils, tape measures, safety glasses, ear protection, and respirators, each in each of those sections. So I'd say be mindful of be mindful of sneaker time in terms of not having to walk around your shop to grab things.
Mm-hmm.
That's like my broad strokes about organization.
It's amazing how much that helps.
My next one is a place for everything and everything in its place. When the things in your shop find a home and they have a place, you don't spend time looking for things. And so just figure out where those things need to live. And that will change throughout the years. You know, at 1 year, you may be doing a ton of one type of project where certain things need to be at certain locations. And then another year, it may need to be someplace else. And so being flexible about moving your shop around so that it works for you, for the types of projects that you're working on at that point in time. You know, keep things in their place so that you're not constantly looking for them. Because you set something down and all of a sudden it's gone. And it's so funny because Jack and I go back and forth about this. He'll pull out a cord or something, and I'll be right behind him rolling it back up so that I don't trip on it, or so that it's there. And he's like, I was using it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were using it, you know? And so I'm big on, like, you know, as soon as you're done with that speed square, it goes back up on your pegboard right where it was at. So then when your mind thinks speed square, you look at the pegboard and it's right there. You don't think speed square and then all of a sudden your pegboard, then table, then, you know, here, looking for it, just burning time. Then in the next sense of organization, have dedicated locations in your shop, no matter the size, for certain things. If you have a table saw in your shop, have a dedicated table saw area set up so that you don't have to set up and take down tools all the time. That's a really big time killer, especially in a small shop because we don't have a lot of space. You know, get a chop saw station set up pronto, you know, so that you're not constantly moving stuff out of the way, you know, to do quick little cuts. Centrally locate the certain processes that are used for very different finishes. So my shop is basically broken up into 3 sections. One is a table saw kind of line. Then we have 2 casting tables. And at the head of those 2 casting tables, we have a chop saw station so that we can chop and go to any one of these 3 without having to walk all the way around the table to get back to the chop saw station. So, you know, chop saw is like one of the main tools that we use in our shop when we're cutting up forms and doing stuff. So we keep it just a couple of steps away from any different table or any different section while we're working, so we reduce sneaker time. Get dust collection handled, especially in a small shop. Do what you have to do to get a large-scale dust collector in there and use it. Get the electrical switches on your table saw if you need to, so that you don't have to constantly be walking around and flipping switches to get things to work. Route cables up on your ceiling if you have to, so that you're not constantly tripping over cables. You know, get your house in order, because that will make you a more successful craftsman.
Yeah, but I like that you're mentioning like some very specific examples, because it's the ambiguous, like keeping your house in order. Like it's a good statement, and some people, but they have to run that through the filter of their own mind, and sometimes there's a little bit lost in translation. So like I really like that you mentioned having multiple. It sounds so simple, but tape measures. Like it sounds like, well, duh, but it's just like, imagine how many people out there are wandering around the shop. I can't find my tape measure. I can't. Well, if you have one at your workbench, if you have one at the table saw, if you have one in your install box, if you have one at the miter station, if you have one that kind of floats around, and each one stays. It does not leave its station. You never have to look for one. There's always one there, and it sounds so simple and so stupid that, and I think that's why it's easy to overlook. It's
Absolutely.
and so that's awesome that you mentioned that. Are there any other broad strokes that you could mention on that, or?
Um, Keep sharp pencils at each location too, or Sharpies. Take the 5 minutes out of your day in the morning to sharpen all your pencils. And this comes back to like kind of being particular about what I use, but I do not use cheap pencils. Like Dixon Ticonderogas are my favorite.
Good pencils.
I'm kind of like a geek for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, every couple of days I'll go through like my little cups that I have at each station, and I'll just pull out all the unsharpened ones, walk over to and I buy an old school sharpener, think about
Mm-hmm.
elementary school. Buy one of those like hand crank
They're
sharpeners,
amazing.
they,
You could
they
kill somebody with
are.
one of those pencils after you get done with it. It's crazy.
It is. It is. And so I just, you know, take another part of the whole like shop organization and being successful is take the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you need at the beginning and every day to reset and clean. Because walking into a messy shop, and I get it, this isn't going to be every day. It's not every day in my shop, but take that time to put those tools away from that day, sweep the floors up, put the extension cords away, so that when you walk in the next day, you walk into a clean space and you're not thinking about all of these miscellaneous little. And so I'm going to segue here for a second. I just watched this YouTube guy. His name is called Inheritance Machining. I don't know if you've seen him yet, but anyways, he's a great podcast, great YouTuber, and he kind of delves into this idea about side projects. And he's got one thing on his YouTube channel about a certain project, but then he's like, oh, add a side project to the list. Keep those side projects to the minimum. If you clean up in the morning and at the end of every day, you don't have a million of those side projects pulling you away from your task that you need to get done for that day. And as we know, you'll be in the middle of, I need to use a chisel. You pull your chisel out, your chisel's not sharp. So now you got a side project, go sharpen your chisel. Or, my chop saw is a little out of square. Now I have to square up my chop saw before I can even start making square cuts. Side project number 2. Now my dust bag is full on my dust collector. Well, side project number 3. And before you know it, you've wasted 2 or 3 hours in the day when you should be done with your form. You should be ready to cast the next day, et cetera, et cetera. So don't let the side projects get out of hand. If you think about it, do it. And make time in your schedule to handle those things. If you're going to spend a day in the shop sharpening chisels, sharpening pencils, cleaning, getting your place looking good, take the time to do that. It's not going to be associated with making money or with making a project, but over the long term, you're going to be more efficient and you're going to make money faster if you do take the time to do that stuff.
Yeah, the concept of batching, I think, really it can be difficult to set up in the beginning, but it really is just because everything that I have to do is so much digital. Like I've got entire days where I'm like, I don't even go in the shop. Like the shop stays closed down for 2 days. So Monday and Tuesday is nothing but digital stuff, editing videos, editing pictures, doing the podcast, all that type of stuff. Just because do that mental switching back and forth is so difficult. I really like that's a pretty good idea. I think I'm actually going to steal that, of having like dedicated shop days every once in a while to do like the maintenance type stuff. Because like if you work with wood like we do, you have to keep those chisels sharpened. Like there's not many things more dangerous than a dull chisel. So there's that. So I really like that. That's a really good idea. Especially if you have like manual tools where you have to keep them sharpened and things like that. I like that. That's great.
Another thing that I'd like to bring into that is, so when Jack and I started working together, he helped me a lot in that respect, or we helped each other, because he had a certain way of working in his shop, and it was not synonymous with the way that I was working in my shop. And so we we had a couple excuse me, we had a couple of those days where we set up a queue for all of our side rails, all of our back racks. Right next to the chop saw, within an arm's reach, we have these vertical racks that hold, total they'll hold 4 sheets of melamine, but they're all cut down into 2-inch side rails, 1-inch back racks, 3-inch pieces for miscellaneous stuff. And so that way you're not like, before you start forming, you're not sitting there, oh, now I got to break down another piece of melamine. I got to do this. You use those dedicated shop days to break down all your large sheet goods into those smaller pieces so that you're not starting your day off with a side project of breaking down that melamine. It's just ready for you to go.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, that can take a day of forming. It can cut 2 or 3 hours off a day of forming. And so you can walk in, you can go get templates in the morning, and by the time you leave the shop at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you're ready to cast the next day.
Huh.
And so, yeah, use those dedicated days to break down that material and have it queued up and waiting. So I'm also gonna segue here to something that Jack and I have been focusing on a lot in the last year, and that's streamlining. That's kind of the basis of what we're trying to do in the shop right now, is streamline everything. Streamline your processes, streamline your mixes, so that there's not a lot of confusion to be had in the process. Now, there's always going to be outliers. You're going to have a hearth with a larger drop face that you're going to have to break down a little material for.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to countertops, aside from those outliers, we are 2 inches thick all the way across the board. I don't even give the client the option to go with different thicknesses. Our countertops are 2 inches thick. That's how it is. And it's close enough to existing granite with 2 laminated pieces of 3/4 that they get a similar look, and you're not causing problems like in terms of distance between cabinets and upper and lower cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
But streamline the process so that when you break down all that material, all you need is 1-inch and 2-inch material. You don't need to wait to hear all the details of the project to start breaking down your material.
Nice. I don't know that I'll be able to use much of that because every piece that I do is so weird custom, but that I really, really like that. That is brilliant. I like the simple things. I like the simple things that have like huge impacts. Like those I think it's easier. It's easy to implement them. Everybody can understand them. It's not some complicated system or something like that. It's the low hanging fruit that can help so many people, and that's where the good stuff is. Is there any is there anything else that falls into that category that you found that's really helpful? Because I really want to talk about like specific tools. I haven't had too many people where I've been able to talk about like really specific tools that are helpful for us, especially when it comes to people who have the concrete part over here and they have the wood. I don't think there's too many of us. I'm sure when you take into total population and all that, there's tons of us, but like active people in the forums, it doesn't feel like there's many of us. Maybe that's just a blind spot of mine.
No, I think you're pretty on the nose with that. I think that you're either into concrete or you're into wood, and it could be because it's hard to do decorative concrete and it's a very dusty, messy shop, and then do fine woodworking where you're having to seal. So without compartmentalizing your shop into 2 separate areas, that may be a little bit more difficult for people.
Yeah.
But specific tools, I mean, and this is such a no-brainer. You're talking about low-hanging fruit. Lights. Get your lighting on point in your shop right off the bat, because if you can't see, you can't create accurate stuff. And so, it's a top-down mentality. If you don't have great lighting at each one of those workstations, you can't even see your lines that you're trying to cut on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another like huge one for me. Getting more specific into tools that I think are great to have in the shop and really have maximized productivity. First and foremost, number one, Festool track saw, hands down. Like if you're a craftsman, and this is to all of you out there that are watching this, if you're a craftsman and you don't have a Festool track saw, go get it, make it happen, because it will be a game changer in your shop. It was for me. I came back from those classes after seeing people use it. Just do it, make it happen. I know it's a big purchase. It will pay for itself a million times over.
What tracks do you prefer? I know they call them rails, which is stupid because it's not a rail saw; it's a track saw. So, but that's just nitpicking.
I believe I use, and I don't know the millimeter specs on them, but I believe I use the 3000 mostly for breaking down large sheet goods, and then I use the 15 or 1700 for breaking down the 4-foot materials. Okay. And then I'll own my mistake here for a minute. I've messed up a couple of Festool track saws by having it skip or not cutting properly. No. So for those, I'll literally take the messed up part over to my chop saw, put a metal blade on it, and I'll chop the track down.
Nice.
And save the rest of the track. And so I've got a couple of shorties for little cuts here and there, but they're all out of a bigger track. So
yeah. See, I made the mistake of I got the 1400 mil for the cross-cutting sheets of melamine, and I think that was a bad decision. I think you need to get the neck size up. So if you haven't bought the tracks yet for the saw, or you're thinking about it, because melamine is oversized, like if we're just cutting like sheets of plywood, for example, the 1400 actually works quite well. I still think that I'd get the bigger one. I like having that extra on both sides, so you're not like, oh, I gotta pull it this way. Oh, I didn't pull it far enough. Now I gotta push it, and it's just having that extra. And then I got the 2700 millimeter for the long runs, and that works brilliantly for the long rips.
Yeah, no matter what you do, if you're scabbing two 14s together, you're gonna get a jog in the center. Get that big 9-foot rail as fast as you can, because it's worth it.
Yeah, the guys were trying to convince me to put the connector piece in there. No, there's no slop. I was like, dude, I'm sorry, you're just not going to convince me that putting that connector in there is going to work just as well as just having the solid run. I was like, screw it, I'm just going to get that. And it, don't get me wrong, it hurt so bad because it is so expensive. Yep. But I love being able to pull that sucker right out of the ceiling, plop it down on the thing, one run, and I'm done. And it's just that was one of the things that I took the one of your pointers on when we were talking back and forth about that. Is that was one of the things that Martin was bringing up that Moffel, I don't know how to pronounce it, but
Malfel or Marfel.
Yeah. He says that they're actually better than Festool, and I wish I had gotten that one because it's my color scheme, and I was like, shit, I should have gotten that. The neon green, part of my soul dies every time I see it. Like, it's just, I know it's so, some people are like, that's dumb, just get the Festool, and I'm like, but it's freaking neon green. I don't want to have neon green in my shop. I need to try and like hide all the boxes so you don't see it.
Just own it. Make yourself a Festool wall in your shop.
I've thought about, and this is going to seem even crazier, I have thought about taking the pieces, the containers and everything apart and painting, like using a plastic paint or dye and dyeing them red just so that I don't have green in there. It could have been any other color. Well, maybe not any other color, but like black or gray or something. Like, but it's but do you hook your track saw up to one of their dust collectors, or do you do it to your big central dust collector?
So I have a CT36 that's dedicated to the chop saw, and then I also have a CT MIDI that is kind of my track saw and job site dust collection system. And so I hook that CT MIDI up to the track saw. I found that like connecting, and I know that it's a hard thing for people to kind of swallow, to have two separate dust collectors or to have like a big dust collector, one dedicated for your chop saw. It was just one of those things. Like when I think about purchases in the shop, I think about hours that are associated with cleaning. And so if I'm going to spend, if I'm charging, $50 an hour for a lot of my projects that I'm doing, I can justify a $300 vacuum, $400 vacuum purchase pretty quickly in the course of cleaning time that I spend around the shop by not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you use a Festool track saw with dust collection, you'll quickly know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is you're not vacuuming up hardly anything. There's a little bit of stuff here and there, but it's nothing like using it without it. And so,
Do you, are you happy with those two purchases? Have you gotten to a point where you're like, I should have gotten a different one, bigger one, smaller one?
um, so yes and no. I wish I would have gotten another CT36 instead of a CT MIDI,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like the CT MIDI is a little underpowered, but I don't. I like the size of it for going onto job sites. The CT36 was huge for lugging it into a job site through doors,
Mm-hmm.
banging it on door casings, things like that. I like the smaller footprint there. So yes and no.
I really don't like that they
I
have the stationary wheels in the back. I I wish they did all
yeah,
swivels.
it's a non-issue for me.
Man, you're so laid back. It's the stupid little things like that I'm like, that's dumb. Who came up with that?
Oh,
Sounds
and
like
then
you've got a
in terms,
36 in your future.
only if Jack says it's okay. um, Another thing that like really became a huge thing for me is the Festool sanders. I love the Festool sanders.
Which
They
one?
are so I've got several in my arsenal. I've got the RO 125, the ETS 125, and the ETS 150. And so the RO is like a handheld belt sander. When it comes to
Mhm.
massive amounts of removal, it is fantastic.
That's the
I mean, that thing
Rotex.
is just yeah, it's a
Hmm.
Rotex. It is just, it's a beast. I mean, you put it on that Rotex mode and you put an 80 grit on it, it will tear through whatever you put under it.
Hmm.
Um, I like the ETS because it's very small and light and maneuverable.
Hmm.
You can get it around corners. It's just a nice sander. And then the ETS 150, I like for the same properties of the 125, except for less passes across pieces. Like if I'm doing cutting boards or something like that around Christmas time,
Hmm.
um, I find that it's got such a big pad on it that you can really just crank through those pieces really
Do
fast.
you get the
And
3 or the
so,
5?
oh, I believe I got the 3.
Huh.
Are you talking about the?
Like
I think on
the
the ETS
size of
125.
the what is it? The shit, I don't know.
The threes. Yeah,
Why'd you go with the
the
3s as opposed to
swirl.
the 5?
It was what my local supplier had at the
Mm,
time, and I didn't even know the difference when I had bought it.
yeah.
So I'd actually bought the sanders because I was on a reseal job, and I thought that it was going to be a good purchase for that reseal job, and it ended up I never used it for grinding down tops ever again.
Hmm.
I switched up to wet grinding with diamond pads. So
Even on site?
even on site, I just make a dam out of Gorilla Tape and keep a wet dry vac there and just vacuum up the slop and clean consistently. So
Huh. That sounds terrible.
it is terrible. It is terrible. That's why I don't offer reseals.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I stay away from reseals. I think they're, I think you can be profitable if you. I've done a couple of them, but if I'm not charging $65 a square foot, I'm not doing it. So I keep it comparable to lost shop time.
Yeah, I think it was John Schuler that was talking about how some of the changes that he made. I don't remember what he mentioned. I'll see if I can find the post and put it up on the screen. But he had some good recommendations for if you're gonna offer it, you need to commit to actually offering it. And then
Yeah,
I think he also mentioned there's somebody else that's all they do is going around and doing the resale. So they're really set up to do that efficiently and all. I'll have to see if I can find the post because it was a really good post on what they were talking about. Because like what you mentioned is if you're not if you're not used to and set up to do that, you can get yourself into trouble real quick. Especially if they don't know what sealer was on there before. You could get
Oh yeah.
into like, does the sealer that you're putting on, is it compatible with what was on there before? Do you have to rip it all the way down? And if you do, like, that's just, I can't see how that's a good idea unless you're gonna commit to it. But that's me being a little bit of a noob. So
Yeah, um, I feel like there's so many variables in terms of offering reseals as a consistent part of your business that it's difficult to manage expectations accordingly.
hmm
Um, so I've done a few of them and I've hated every single one of them. So I just try to avoid them like the plague.
yeah. Do you, when you're processing the pieces there at your shop, do you wet or dry grind?
Wet.
Okay. Are you using have you gone up to the big beasties? The what do the people recommend? The Klindexes, the UFOs, or do you do like a crap? I cannot think of the brand.
Don't worry about it. So we use a and I'm spacing on the brand now. It's not the Klindex, but it's the other one. It's a UFO. And I didn't have it in the shop. Jack brought it over,
Mm,
and it was a game changer. It
triple
took
head.
me from yeah took me from hours of processing down to less than an hour of processing. So we use that for the main amount of removal. Then we use a little pneumatic, cheap pneumatic Chinese one that I got from, I think it was Xiamen Manufacturing on Facebook. They contacted me and I was like, oh yeah, $15 for a little polisher. This stupid little polisher's lasted me like 4 years. And
hmm
so we do all of our edges and our edges and our sides with that. And then we use the bigger grinder for the majority of the removal.
Nice.
Um, and we start and finish at 200. So I'm
Oh,
not jumping up through grits or anything like that. We, you know, grind and stop the day that we flip them off the tables, and then the day that we flip, we process that same day
hmm
and start and finish at 200. And so try to keep it as part of that simplification process. Just try to keep it simple.
yeah. Are you acid washing or do you just keep it at 200?
We acid wash it after we slurry.
Mm.
Yep,
hmm
and we go heavy acid with what we're using right now. So
what percentage are you going?
it's like a 10 to 1.
Oh.
I'm a little more aggressive with it, so if the pieces are smoking, I know they're getting tooth.
Yeah, I
So
gotta see it
get to
melting.
it. That's right. Get to it.
uh are there any helpful things that you've done with your? What are you mainly using your table saw for then? If you're, is that mainly the woodworking? Because if you're ripping everything down with the track saw, are you doing your rails with the table saw?
we do the we do the rails on the table saw. I find that the setup time with the track saw for ripping something like rails is just
hmm
too particular. Um, Really, the track saw is just for those specific cuts that you know either breaking something down because you don't want to move it around the shop,
hmm
or doing like a geometric cut on a small piece if you're doing like a planter or something like that. And especially in the small shop for people that don't have table saws, a piece of foam and a track saw is just it's worth its weight in gold.
hmm
And so, but yeah, most of the ripping is done on the table saw. But I've got a big Delta contractor saw with a big stationary outfeed table. And that was just kind of part of my past. And so,
hmm
if I was going to say, if you either have to buy a table saw for your shop or a track saw for your shop, and you got to make a choice between those two purchases, go track saw first. Um,
I would
the
not like having to make that decision. That's a tough one.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And I'm very careful with my hands when it comes to the shop. Everybody, you don't need to go buy a saw stop. You don't even need to get to that point.
Wow, wow, wow,
If
wow,
you
wow,
get
wow, 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 wow.
use the DeWalt contractor saw, bolt it down to a base that
Ooh.
you make, and keep it stationary for the time being. It'll work. When you don't have
Yeah,
the
yep,
money or the resources to go buy
yes.
those big ones, start with the $300 or $400 DeWalt saw.
Yep.
bolt it down. It'll be good enough in the meantime for your side
Yeah,
rails.
yeah, yeah.
You
Especially,
don't need a $4,000 saw
yeah,
stop
yeah,
just yet.
yeah. If you have, especially if you have a track saw, preferably
Yeah.
something of comparable quality to the Festool. I never used Moffle, so I can't say for sure on that. But I think as long as you're getting up into that quality, you'll be fine. I had the DeWalt track saw. I hated it. It. Sorry if anybody has it and they love it. I hated every minute of it. I thought it was terrible. The cuts were terrible. The rails did. I was very disappointed in the rails. That's probably the one caveat that I would throw in there. Um,
So I'll parry that with Jack brought in a Makita track saw, and it uses the same tracks as the Festool,
mhm,
and it cuts just as good. So if you need a lower budget version of
mhm.
that, go with the Makita. It's great.
I've heard really good things to people that didn't want to do the festival and they got the Makita. I don't think I've heard
Yep.
anybody say anything bad about getting the Makita. There's a lot of aftermarket accessories for that and the tracks as well, which is pretty interesting. Do you use any accessories for your track saw, or you just slap the sucker down and go to town?
Um, I mean, I think I use the little cord thing on the end, but 90% of the time I just slap it down and go for it. Throw the dust collection and the electrical cord over my shoulder and get to trimming.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, see, I
yeah,
thought about getting the parallel guides, but
no, don't. They're a waste of time. I had them and I got rid of them.
really, which ones did you get? The ones that were straight through festival? Yeah.
Yeah, I I bought them on Facebook Marketplace when they came up for sale from somebody else in my community, and yeah, I never use them. So
Yeah. Well, that's good to know because they're I mean they're definitely not cheap. Um,
mm.
is there anything else?
if you
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh no
Sorry.
no definitely go ahead. Like my thing is stupid compared to what you'll say.
If you're if you're big into doing like seamless pieces and need to join melamine, I think the domino is a worthwhile purchase. The smaller one, not the bigger one, the
Mhm.
500, not the 7. That's great for you can get away with a biscuit joiner. It's just not as tight. Um, it's another
Yeah, see
tool.
that's interesting that you brought that up because I was talking with Caleb about that, and because I just got done using the domino on a vanity, and I just I don't now that I've used it well, relatively speaking, a lot. I don't know that I, in good conscience, would recommend somebody who does primarily concrete to get one. That's a really expensive for because I don't know. Tell me if you agree with this. I think the biscuit joiner and a router to kind of get rid of that lip that you could sometimes get. I think getting both of those, you will get a plenty good enough uh, connection to be able to do that type of piece where you could get away with that without spending the extra money on the domino.
I 100% agree. Um, Now, my bias comes in is that I'm a woodworker and
Yep.
a concrete guy.
Hmm.
So if you're joining big legs onto things where you're doing dimensional lumber, stuff
Hmm.
like that, that's where I think the domino really shines. But you're right. In terms of only being a concrete guy, you can 100% get away with a biscuit joiner, no problem. Biscuit joiner and a router.
Yeah, see, because that was I don't really have like what I mentioned earlier with us being in a very unique situation of doing both the wood. A lot of guys will do the concrete and the steel. That seems very very common, but the concrete and wood, uh, if you do both of those, I love the domino. It's great. I don't have the 700. I only have the 500, which
Same.
which may end up being a problem here in the future. I'm not sure because I work in really thick stock, so I'm doing pieces that are 3 inches, 3.5, 4 inches thick. Um, I'm hoping that I can get away with maybe making the mortises and tenons myself, and then not using the dominoes in those parts and using the dominoes for other parts. But we'll have to see. I'm glad that I'm glad that you were able to comment on that because I feel that giving a suggestion based on my own my own experiences and biases is not, can't think of the word. I'm drawing a blank here, but not reckless, but maybe ill-advised. So it's good to get another person's perspective on that because it is such an expensive purchase. Um, Saying like, "Oh yeah, you should totally go out and get this," and they get this, and I'm like, "I never use this thing. Thanks a lot." Um, Plus, I don't seam a whole lot of melamine together, so so there's that as well.
I think with anything that we're doing or any purchases that you need to make, you need to weigh them with how effective you think that they're going to be in your shop.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we suggest here, I think, take with a grain of salt. It's not a one size fits all approach. So, um, you figure out what works for you and fits your budget. We're very much sticking things together here with what we have to do with. So, we say track saw. If it doesn't fit for you, doesn't mean you have to go out, and buy it right now. So
Mm-hmm.
this is not a one size fits all approach. This is very much conditional on your shop and what works for you and fits in your budget. Um, I've got a gentleman down in the Phoenix area that he has been coming up and training with me, working for me, and I've kind of been imparting knowledge on him for the last couple of years. And he doesn't have a lot of resources to pull from in terms of buying tools for his shop. And so some things, he looks at my shop and he's like, wow, you're all set up. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, dude, this is
Years.
10 years of building,
Yep.
years and years of building, and you're in year one. So don't think that you have to go down and drop 10 grand on tools tomorrow to be able to do that work. Like I've, I've sold off old tools that, I don't use anymore, just taking up space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, more often than you would think. And so I've slowly worked my way up to where I'm able to have these nicer things. But it's not to say that I wasn't getting away with a level and a Milwaukee battery powered skill saw
Mm-hmm.
as a track saw for years. So if that's what works for you, then let it work for you until you can afford to pay for it. Don't bury yourself in debt thinking you need to set up the shop first.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on making some sales and getting those jobs in so that you can afford to pay for those out of jobs.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I've always taken it, is if I get a big job and I need a new tool, I wait for that to come in, and then when it does, then make that purchase. But and for you, like you say with the Domino 700, wait until the absolute
Mm-hmm.
last second until you have to buy it and you have exhausted all other options before you pull the trigger. Because I mean, I can't remember what it cost last time I checked, but it's like a $1,500 purchase or
Mm-hmm.
something, or $1,200 purchase. That's substantial in our shop.
Oh yeah.
So
Uh, yeah. Well, okay. I'm gonna get you here. I want to see what type of person you are. All right. So, chisels and woodworking tools. Are you Eastern or Western?
Eastern or Western in terms of
Chisels.
I'm a Stanley Sweetheart kind of guy.
Ah!
So, and that's only because that's what I came into the shop with when I first started. My dad actually bought me a set of chisels for Christmas, and it was a set of Stanley Sweethearts. And yeah, that's kind of my roots, and so I stick with it.
Okay. I can respect that. That's like, especially like when you were talking like with was it your grandpa? You said that it was a woodworker. Yeah. See, like,
Mm-hmm.
so I can respect that, like, tradition. And okay. I'll give you a pass. I'll give you a pass this time, but only slightly. Um, yeah. So I think I'm gonna be able to get away for hopefully a while and not have to get the 700 domino, because I've got a set of really nice handmade Japanese chisels coming here in probably a week or so. So excited. So excited. I'm like a little kid in a candy store. Like, I'm so like, these suckers are like $140 a pop. I'm like, oh, but you know what? I absolutely love that they are crafted by hand by a craftsman in Japan. They have it's that's my thing. Like it's so because like I make things by hand. I think it's important to help other people who make things by hand. I mean, like obviously within reason, because that can get really expensive really quickly. But
As you sit here and talk about a Domino 700
oh
purchase.
yeah, well I'm putting that off as long as possible, man. Because like, but that's the thing though is I'm having to put in some stupid hours because I got a call from a freight company yesterday. Like, hi, we're calling on behalf of Felder USA, and I'm like, hi. I didn't even know that this had shipped yet. They're like, yeah, we're calling to set up delivery. Can you have it delivered this Thursday? And I'm like, uh, yes, but no. So I've got to, so that's going to be crazy. So as soon as we get done here, I got to run out there and start working in the shop and get things all set up. But with that being said, is there anything that you would like to close out with? Any parting knowledge that you think would be good for maybe people who are they've been in the industry for a while and they're stuck, maybe they're getting to the point of burnout, or maybe there's newer people in the industry where they're just confused. Is there any general, maybe that's too broad of a stroke, but like good information that you would like to leave people with?
um, take the time to make what makes you happy. Always remember why you got into this industry in the first place and never let go of that, because there's so many external things that can get you down in this industry
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't hang on to what you love, you can quickly get away from why you got into this.
Check it out.